Hi, I'm David Perell, and I'm the founder of a writing school called Rite of Passage. Today, I want to talk about the creative process. You know, maybe you feel like you're not creative enough. Maybe you feel like you just don't have good, original ideas to write about. You feel like whenever you write, whenever you think of an idea, hundreds of people have already written about that idea before, had that same insight. Or maybe you feel like you don't even know where to look for new ideas. Maybe you feel like you're just overwhelmed with the abundance of information on the internet. Well, I have a solution for you, which I want to talk about today, which is how you can apply Nintendo, yes, Nintendo, the video game company, their product philosophy to your writing, so that you can be more creative and find more interesting ideas consistently. And first, I want to start with a story. This story goes back to why Nintendo uses a product development philosophy called lateral thinking with withered technology. And that philosophy ended up leading to the most successful gaming console of the 20th century, which was the Game Boy. You probably used it when you were a kid, or you probably used it at some point 10, 20, 30 years ago. It was that magical device, one of the first moments where you could be sitting in a car, on a train, and you could just start playing a video game and just get absorbed into a whole new world. And so one day, a little-known Nintendo engineer, he was commuting home on the train when he saw a man who was sitting next to him. He was playing with an LCD calculator, and he was just punching the buttons because he was so bored. And so he asked himself, what if commuters could enjoy a portable device that was both a watch and a gaming device? And that product ended up becoming a huge success, and it was called the Nintendo Game & Watch, a video game console that preceded the Game Boy and ended up leading to this ideas of lateral thinking with withered technology. And so I apologize for the pronunciation here, but the engineer's name was Gunpei Yokoi. He went on to create Donkey Kong on the Nintendo Game & Watch, which was of course a very famous game. And then he also invented something called the D-pad. And what the D-pad is it's that four-way directional controller that you find on all the modern game consoles and controllers. You see them on the Xbox, you see them on the PlayStation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It fits right into your hand. It's almost sort of in the shape of an airplane yoke. And he didn't stop there. He ended up inventing the Super Mario franchise that Nintendo was a big part of. And then in 1989, the Game Boy, which was Nintendo's big success of the 20th century. So what did he do? What was the secret behind Yokoi's success? Well, now I want to tell you what that product philosophy was. So you might think that Nintendo, just had the best technology. They're a wealthy Japanese company. At the time, the Japanese economy was booming, and so all they did to innovate was they just poured more money, more people, more time at every single problem. So of course, they were just ahead of every other company. Not so fast. That's not true. See, these tools, these consoles, they were mostly developed before Nintendo was a really successful company. At the time, they weren't nearly as big as they are today. And Nintendo, because they weren't that big, they didn't really have the budget to push the technological frontier. And so when it came to hardware, Nintendo wasn't really a cutting-edge company in the same way that Apple is today, in the same way that a lot of these technology companies are always pushing that frontier. What Nintendo did instead, because they had less money and they didn't quite have the other resources of some of the other computer companies and competitors at the time, was they used a strategy called lateral thinking with withered technology. And so instead of looking for cutting-edge ideas, which is what most people think about when they think about inventing new products and new technologies, what they did was they combined old and cheap technologies in new ways. And here's why that worked. See, this engineer saw that Nintendo's players, they valued gameplay, the actual experience of holding one of these Game Boys in your hand, what it was like to play the video games themselves. They valued that gameplay more than technical details like screen resolutions, which a lot of the techies were really excited about at the time. Same thing with color and how many colors could actually be on the screen. As long as the gameplay was good, people would just play for hours and hours. And these Game Boys were actually quite easy to use. use because they were powered by these AA batteries that were cheap and quite easy to find. And so that is in part why the Game Boy was so affordable and durable compared to other consoles of the time. Rather than going cutting edge, they said, what are some of these older technologies that are very standardized, just like the AA batteries, and how can we build great games around those standard and quite frankly unexciting technologies? While Nintendo's competitors try to just outspend each other with fancy displays and advanced computing power, Nintendo combined that readily available technology in new ways. And today, the Game Boy has sold more than 118 million units using this product philosophy. Now, when it comes to lateral thinking with withered ideas, it's not just Nintendo that has been able to combine old and cheap technology in new ways. The Dyson vacuum design was inspired by the way that sawmills use Cyclone Force to eject sawdust. Henry Ford borrowed from two industries to design his famous assembly line. First, he studied the watch industry, which led to interchangeable parts. He also looked at the canning industry, which inspired continuous flow manufacturing. And even Bitcoin, which some people predict will become the most important technology of the 21st century, it has built upon a whole lineage of inventions that came before it. Cryptography advancements, they were made in the 1970s. Digital cash, a lot of that research was done in the 1980s. The whole cypherpunk philosophy was born out of the 1990s. And then throughout the 2000s, there were a bunch of digital cash experiments, which Satoshi Nakamoto specifically cited in the Bitcoin white paper. So now we've looked at Nintendo, we've looked at Dyson, we've looked at Ford, we've looked at Bitcoin, a whole litany of examples of innovation that hasn't come so much from being at the cutting edge and using recently invented technologies, but rather using older technologies, borrowing from the inventions of the past, and quite frankly, these unexciting ideas that are combined in new ways. You can apply lateral thinking with withered technology, that idea to your writing. And I just call it lateral thinking with withered ideas. You see, the internet is always chasing the new. On the internet, we are obsessed with the new. You open Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everything, it seems, has been produced in like the last 48 or 72 hours. It seems like a new iPhone comes out, everyone stops to watch the keynote. A new Netflix show comes out, and you have to cancel your weekend plans just to keep up with the social conversation so that you can watch and talk about it with all your friends. A new book rises to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and all of a sudden you rush to read it, you and all these other people, so that you can get the most cutting edge information. It's like this race, it's a competition. So many people are pursuing this strategy. But there's a different one. There is the lateral thinking with withered ideas strategy. You can go to the Criterion collection. Basically, it just collects some of the best movies of all time onto a single place. It gives you recommendations and you can watch them. You can also watch classic speeches on YouTube. I do this all the time. There's a great series of great speeches from American history, great war speeches, great leadership speeches, great keynotes. And also, this one is my favorite, classic books that often are free to read because they're so old and they no longer have a copyright. You can often download the PDF, download a Kindle version for free. It doesn't cost you anything. And once you come across these older ideas, well, just look at what kind of connections you end up seeing between them. You see, looking for new ideas is often exhausting and it can be expensive. And you can kind of end up like the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland, where you're on that treadmill running faster and faster and faster just to keep up with everything that's happening. But look, you can opt out of that game entirely. In that game, no matter how hard you try, you see there's always these new ideas that are being released. You're just never going to be able to keep up. And so what you can do is follow in the footsteps of Nintendo, Dyson, Ford, Bitcoin, and go back to these old ideas. Try to look back at ideas that are timeless, that are forgotten, that are both figuratively and literally cheap, even though there is a lot of wisdom to them. And you'll benefit from living a calmer life. You'll be done with the exhaustion of chasing the intellectual frontier. And you'll be able to pursue timeless ideas that that'll stay relevant for years and years to come, and look for connections between them. And I call that lateral thinking with withered ideas. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to watch another video just like this, I recommend this one on how to find new ideas. And also, I suggest that you subscribe. I'm going to be publishing videos about writing, creating on the internet, finding new ideas all the time. And if you subscribe, you will find out about them when they come out. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.